Hi guys, and this is just a very quick video, just a quick chat to you really. I've been asked by loads of people, will I be upgrading my Z6 II to a Z6iii? And this video I hope explains why I want to be upgraded from the Z6 II to the Z6iii. Now, obviously the Z6iii is a fantastic camera. It's amazing. It's the latest and the greatest from Nikon. But I'm going to explain to you in 5 very simple steps why the Z6 II is more than a camera for most people in all you do. Now, I'm just going to clarify a fact that I am a photographer from South Wales in Wales, obviously, in Great Britain. And I run a few photography groups. I do portrait sessions. I tutor photography. I got my hands on many cameras. I like to play with different cameras. My camera of choice, through whatever reason, is the Z6 II, and I'm more than happy with it. Before that, as you all know, I was a Fuji user, and before that I was a Nikon user. So I'm back to Nikon, which I've been back to now for the last few months, and I'm more than happy with the Z6 II. So here are 5 reasons why the Z6 II is great, and basically 5 reasons why I'm not really interested in upgrading to the Z6iii. Now obviously for yourselves things may be different. You may need a specific thing on the camera, but this is just talking about myself as a photographer who earns a living from photography. So I've written down little notes on what I'm going to say to you. So the first thing, and I think it's one thing which a lot of people tend to mention, is the autofocus. Now with the autofocus, I use autofocus for a lot of things, okay? So I've never once thought to myself, oh my god, the Z6 II has got crap autofocus, I'm missing my focus. Okay, not once have I ever thought that. I'm going to run through a few reasons to clarify the point so you understand what I'm talking about. Portraits. Now I do a lot of portraits. My main sort of income and my main way of doing things at the moment is with portraits. And I do portrait shoots. Now on a portrait shoot I can do anything up to 700 images, usually around 100 or 200 images, and at the end of the shoot I come back, check my photos. The Z6 II, it hits critical focus on the eye almost every time. Out of the 700 photos I took recently on one event, I threw away about 7, and that was generally not only because it's missed focus in the eye, but I just missed focus altogether, or there was camera wobble, etc. In a general shoot, when I'm shooting 100 odd photographs, you know, I'm lucky if I throw away 1 image. You know, the Z6 II hits the eye, hits critical focus every time, and a lot of the photography I'm doing is backlit with the sun behind, and it doesn't struggle at all. Okay, busy family life and kids playing. Of course, as you all know, you're probably aware if you follow my blogs and you follow my website and you see my videos, I have 2 boys, 2 young boys, 1 9, 1 5. They're always running around. I've always got the camera. I'm taking photos. I never do I worry that the autofocus is going to miss, because it doesn't. It hits them every time, and I don't even have to think about it. The next thing I've written down here is birds in flight and birds in trees. Now, a lot of people seem to struggle with birds in flight, no matter what camera they've got. But I have to say, with the Z6 II, I generally point at the bird, and it hits focus. I must caveat that by saying I usually set it to 7 frames per second, not at 30 frames per second or whatever the highest I can get out of the camera. It's nearly always 7 frames per second, and I find that with that little buffer in between, it hits focus almost every time. And I'd say out of all the birds I shoot, I'm getting quite a high hit rate, probably 80% of the time, which, considering when I was shooting Fuji, it was hit or miss. You know, this is much better. I can go out there and shoot birds without any issues. The size of the birds is a different thing, of course. Now, when I'm shooting birds, I'm talking about bigger birds, sort of seagulls and bigger. With that, it's bang on, hits focus. When I'm trying to shoot the smaller birds, in the trees, etc., they're fine. When they're flying, obviously, it takes a bit more practice, and you do have slightly less hit rate. But the word I mentioned there was practice. And no matter how good your autofocus is, practice is important, okay? And as I say, from the autofocus point of view for the Z6 II, I've never once thought to myself, you know, I need better autofocus, because I've never needed better autofocus. Autofocus has been spot on, and I'm more than happy with it. Now, point 2, why I'm not thinking of getting the Z6iii, and that is the dynamic range. Now, it's not a huge issue, okay? And for a lot of you, it won't affect the way you shoot. You know, if you shoot certain ways, it won't affect you. But I do shoot a lot of backlit images, whether it be shooting into the sun for sunsets on landscape photos, or shooting into the sun for portraits, which means then I tend to, if I'm not using a flash, I tend to bring up the shadows. Now, the reason I bought the Z6 II is because of the fantastic dynamic range. Now, another Z6iii, the dynamic range is just around a stop difference between ISO 100 and 800. But I really don't want to go back. I don't want to lose the dynamic range I've got. I don't have to bracket or anything with the Z6 II. I can take a photograph, I can pull up the shadows, or I can drop the highlights, whatever I need to do, and I don't get any trouble at all. You know, I've never once thought about bracketing with this camera. Like with the Fujis, I'd take a bracket of a stop, 2 stops below on exposure, 2 stops above, just to get that dynamic range. With the Z6 II, I haven't thought of it. Literally, I can take a photograph and I can bring down the highlights if I need to. I can raise the shadows, and it captures everything perfectly. More than happy with the dynamic range, okay? I just check what else I've written from this. And that's it. Yeah, dynamic range is an issue. It's not a major issue. If I did go to the Z6iii in the future, you know, I'd probably change the way I shoot slightly. But at the moment, I'm more than happy with the dynamic range, and I see no reason at all to change for that. Point 3, the screen. Now, this is actually more important than what you think, okay? Now, I've owned fully articulated screens before, okay, with the Nikon cameras. I used to turn the screen around, and I hated it. Every single second of it, I hated it. With the Z6 II, just like my X-T3 I had, I literally take the camera, flip it underneath, I can look down at it. I don't have to twist it, turn it, etc. And that is the reason why. It's the articulated screen. I'm not sold on an articulated screen. It's another thing to go wrong as well. You know, you're out in the field, you're banging things around, there's joints here and everywhere. The articulated screen is not for me. And if the Z6iii came out with a tilty screen instead, I'd probably go for it, but not the articulated screen. I do know that it's much brighter, and I know that in use it's much better to, you know, when you're seeing things. But yet again, with the Z6 II, I've never been out in the field and thought to myself, I can't see the screen. Never thought of it. Especially here in Britain, it's rarely sunny, and you know, I've never had that issue. Point 4, size matters. It really does matter, and the Z6iii is slightly bigger, slightly heavier. And for me, moving from Fuji, where I want to stay quite small, I want to keep my camera still quite small. And I know there's not much difference between the Z6 II and the Z6iii, but in the hand, you notice it. I noticed it. You know, it's bigger, and that doesn't mean a lot for many of you. You know, but for me and for my style of shooting, I want to be as light as I can with my camera. And the extra size, the Z6 II is just perfect. It's just perfect for me, and I'm happy with that, okay? As I said, that would be different for everybody. Some people want bigger cameras, some people want smaller cameras. I just find the Z6 II the sweet spot. Point 5, and the final point, is the value to price ratio. Now, is it worth, is the price worth it to upgrade, you know, if you upgrade it? So if you trade in your Z6 II or your Z6, are the differences you're getting big enough to warrant the £1,800 you may pay towards the camera? Is there big enough difference to outright buy a £2,800 camera compared to your Z6 or your Z6 II? Right, assuming that I traded the Z6 II at £1,000 and the Z6iii would still cost me £1,800, I could do it tomorrow, and I could go out and change it. But in use, as you've heard from the first 4 points, literally, it doesn't justify it. That £1,800 for minuscule changes is not worth it. I don't find I missed any shots for the autofocus. I know I've never, as I said, worried about the autofocus. There's new color profiles on the Z6iii, but I shoot RAW these days. You know, I'll use my standard color profile for my JPEGs, but I edit and use RAW files. And I just don't think at the end of the day, for me, and for many of you, you know, I don't think it's worth the change. In fact, I speak to a lot of people, I work with a lot of people, and a lot of them just, you know, they use like 10% of the camera, 20% of the camera. They don't use the camera to the fullest. If you particularly go out to shoot birds, you may need the Z6iii to capture the smaller birds. You may need it. But, you know, but for me and for most people who just, you know, I shoot birds quite a lot, but not the tiny little birds. And when I do, as you've seen in my blogs, you know, I don't tend to miss that much anyway. Of course, it all depends on you, of course. The Z6iii is an extraordinary camera, and I admit it's a fantastic camera. But I hope you've listened to my 5 points that I've mentioned, and you can see that there's no need to upgrade. Some people have gas, you know, gear acquisition syndrome, so they feel they have to upgrade. But before you go and buy a new camera, whether it's a Z6iii or whatever, think to yourself, am I missing the autofocus? Am I missing a feature from the camera? Whatever it may be, think to yourself, are you missing it? I hope that's helped you, and I hope you understand that, of course, we're all different, but they're my little points. And I hope that you leave some comments below and tell me what you think. And in the future, when I buy a Z6iii, which I no doubt will in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, or when this Z6ii breaks down, then I'll update you on what I think of the camera then. So stay tuned. Don't forget to visit onecameraonelens.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Whatever your comment is about, don't forget to comment. And I'll see you soon. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.